think we can start now.
Has anybody entered?
Yeah, people will, I guess. And some people were waiting, I know, so they would be entering.
Okay,
It would,
I'll just
it would show up
introduce
on the
this.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this event is organized by the Much Ado community, which is a rebranding of the old digital book club. We were before this year we were called the Talking Shoals Book Club. The Much Ado community now is a digital space where we discuss various books from different disciplines, and uh, we do believe that it's very important that all our personalities, the various aspects of our personalities and our sense of humor, and most importantly our heart, this should be brought to the table, especially in a year that demands to be felt. And therefore we have invited my very, very good friend Sagnik to talk about his background in history and the various aspects of history with which he's going to connect our favorite children's fiction, Harry Potter. And this discussion mainly focuses on Christianity and medieval European history and how he will connect that with the various themes of Harry Potter. Before that, I'm bound to give a bio of Sagnik. He's somebody whom you should know, and he's somebody whom you should befriend because there's so much to learn from him. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree in History and Philosophy from the University of Groningen, for which he was also the recipient of the Honours Graduation Medal in the year 2020, awarded by the Faculty of Arts. Specializing in cultural and intellectual history, at present he's a student fellow at the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland, working in the field of state and tribe relations in Eastern India. He's also now a master's student at the Department of History, Presidency University, Kolkata. Hey. And he serves as an advisor to the Center for Regional Research and Sustainability Studies, which is an independent think tank based in Leuven, Belgium. Sagnik, let us start the discussion.
Very pleased to be here.
We are so glad to have you.
The customary opening. Although I should point out, perhaps I'm audible, right? Properly visible, audible. Okay. I hope I am. I should point out that this discussion that I have framed, I did this before at another platform a couple of days ago, and this sort of goes more towards Christian theology, and it's better to talk about medieval Christianity than specifically talk about medieval European history in general, because medieval European history is a bit far too broad to be covered, and I am probably one of the least qualified people to talk about medieval European history. I do not specialize in medieval European history. I had a very minimum education in medieval European history, perhaps better than some, perhaps worse than a lot, but yeah, but I will try mainly to focus on Harry Potter and its relation to Christianity and medieval Christianity and theology and philosophy and medieval numerology and all of that specifically. And it's not something radically new that we are doing here. It has been done before. Papers have been written, entire books have been written. So a lot of people don't know that Harry Potter is actually one of a very well-researched area, in spite of being popular fiction and very much debated whether it is literature or not. However, it is there are books, there are entire monographs on this topic, and if you search at the right places, ProQuest and others, you will find entire PhD dissertations on Harry Potter and various aspects: international relations in Harry Potter, history in Harry Potter, the presentation of witchcraft in Harry Potter, theology, etc., etc. So yeah, I thought I should give this disclaimer before I start. So yeah, over to you, Samraggni.
Right. It will be great if we can start it this way. Why did you choose this particular topic to talk about today?
Yeah, the first time I did this, this topic was given to me because they were having a discussion on this. So, and I was having a discussion on somebody. This is one of the perks of discussing things that you have no expertise in discussing, but that's the whole idea of Adda. But then we were having Adda, we were having a meeting of sorts and discussing, and with a couple of people, mainly from English literature, from the same background as you. And this idea came about, and I had this discussion with junior students from another university in Kolkata, and that turned out pretty well. And so that was the first. Now, why Christianity? That was the medieval history aspect, which I will not focus so much today. I will try not to focus so much on today. But that the Christianity angle is rather interesting, because every year at some point or the other, there's this whole somewhere, mostly in the United States, not so much anywhere else, there are these whole book burning festivals, if you call them festivals, where Harry Potter books are bought and burnt. I'm sure J.K. Rowling doesn't have any problem with that, because that just means more books are purchased. And nor does Bloomsbury or anybody, because and the whole idea of burning Harry Potter books and making this statement, I think some people even tried introducing legislation in the US Congress, and the main idea was that it promotes witchcraft, and the counter argument was that it promotes ethical values and ethics and morals and moral principles of philosophy. However, the counter argument sort of was always laid that it may promote moral and principle and very distinctly Christian values. However, the medium through which it does is witchcraft, and witchcraft is specifically condemned in scripture. So there is an entire, not a minority actually, it's larger than you would want them to be, a whole community of people who denounce this entire series of novels and who denounce this whole, so it's almost like it's a counter phenomenon. So Harry Potter is a phenomenon, and there's a counter phenomenon of this sort, and that actually drives research. There's a lot of research. There are professors in theology, there are professors in philosophy. One particular professor who has a rather ironical name, or rather coincidental name, that his surname is Granger, Professor John Granger, who is actually at the forefront of research into theology in the novel series. And he was a professor, I think, of philosophy or of theology at some point at no, I don't remember which university, but in the US again. So he has a number of books on the series, and so that was kind of the starting point of this discussion, pretty much.
Right.
So that makes it a very fertile ground. I should tell our audiences, by the way, that my parents were not as indulging as some others. They did not really buy Harry Potter books for me because they were very expensive when we were reading them. And nowadays they are cheaper, because at that point it was only the hardbound volumes that were available. So I never actually purchased a Harry Potter book. My mother, being a school teacher, came with certain perks that she could borrow books for indefinite amount of period from the library. And most of my books I actually read from through that source. However, the Deathly Hallows I read twice, one in class 7th grade, and one in 9th grade, both times lent from Samraggni, by the way. And when we were pitching this idea for this discussion, I said it's been exactly 10 years that I first read Deathly Hallows, and I borrowed it from her. So I thought I should.
And we were reading medieval history back then.
Yeah. That was a coincidence that it was 7th grade, and medieval Europe was actually on the syllabus when I read Harry Potter through the exam. Fortunately, I passed it.
Since the subtitle, or not really the subtitle, but the following line through the title of our poster is actually a direct quotation from the Bible. I was wondering if you could connect the name Potter with Christianity and then the character of Potter.
Yeah, it's not difficult actually. It's Christ was a potter, so to say, and in the Bible, Christ is actually repeatedly referred to as Potter, and one of them is what we have, and not just Christ. In this case, God, because the Book of Isaiah is in the Old Testament, but even in the New Testament, it gets rebranded as Christ. But in the Old Testament, God is actually referred to as Potter. In the Book of Psalms, there are 2 references to God as Potter. And in the Book of Isaiah, that is the quotation in the poster, so to say, that we have, we are thy clay and thou art potter. there's, "Oh Lord, we are thy clay and thou art potter." So in that sense, God is potter. The name Harry Potter actually has Franco-Latinate roots. And we will see this quite a lot of times. Names are specifically chosen in many ways to have these Frankish Latinate roots, French, Old French particularly, and also Latinate, but then sometimes they're combined. Half of it is French and half of it is Latin. This is intentional. And why I say this is intentional, although I know as a literature student, it must be cringe-worthy because literature students do not go into authorial intent. It's taboo to go into authorial intent, but as training in history, it's very important to go into authorial intent. Then you can just deconstruct it, but first go into authorial intent. Anyway, Rowling studied French literature at the University of Exeter. So it's not surprising that you have, and this whole idea of medieval fantasy is these symbols and symbolism and name relations and symbol relations. So that's very common. So Harry Potter, you can derive the name Harry through the French Harry or Ari, which actually has dual etymological roots. We don't know exactly which one. One is Ariel, the archangel Ariel, protector of God. That's easy. But the other one is Aria, from Latin, it's air. So Harry Potter, in that sense, would actually be the heir of God. Potter is God, so that's the heir of God. And the heir of God is, again, another epithet that is applied to Christ a number of times in the Bible. And it's not just Christ, it's Christ and his disciples. That's the heir of God. So Harry Potter essentially is the heir of God in that sense. So and I was saying that Harry Potter is essentially a Christ figure, not only a Christ figure, but the entire tale is essentially very Christian. So these evangelicals, evangelists who have a problem with Harry Potter and the medium, they don't have their story very straight.
What about the setting, the geographical setting? How is it? How are you relating that with the medieval historical context?
The geographical setting is entirely medieval. Well, at least it's difficult. It's kind of a medieval bubble that this entire story is based in, because Hogwarts is a medieval castle, and as a medieval castle, it has all the sort of contraptions and trappings of a medieval castle. It has this whole, in the Deathly Hallows, we see this whole the army that protects the school, the knights that are sort of in this petrified form that only become animated once you cast the spell Pia Totem Locomotor, and you have this whole army of knights that protect the castle. You have a lake, you have a castle, you have a whole bunch of house elves that serve the castle and its precincts. You have the house elves who work in the kitchen. That's reminiscent of forced labor in many ways, and it is also in the novel. It's also in it's embedded in the tale that it is reminiscent of forced labor, because in the fourth book, I think, in the Goblet of Fire, Hermione starts this society for the protection of elfish folk or something like that, SPEW, SPEW, where she tries to promote the rights of the elves and house elves and stuff like that. So that is very strongly reminiscent of emancipation and amelioration attempts and stuff like that. That directly connects the story to bonded labor, which is a very medieval thing. Although I personally believe, from a structural point, that whole SPEW, that chapter is plot convenience. It doesn't have any connection to the broad story, and it's even left out of the films. So that is a very thing. Yeah, you're back. Okay, so I was
just interrupting you for 1 minute. I had a huge power cut here, and my background is completely dark. So I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. But
yeah,
we'll
as
continue.
long as you're visible, so I think you can continue. Yeah. So that is one thing, and on the other hand, you have it's based in geographically. You asked a geographical question. Is based in Scotland, because you have a Scottish loch next to it. The Great Lake is a Scottish loch, and Scotland has lots of lochs. And I don't know if there are Loch Ness monster in the lochs, but that's it. It's a castle. It's a huge castle. Castles are distinctly medieval because and that is a defining feature, because with the decline of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire, around 476, that's a accepted date sort of, you have this decline of urbanism all across Western Europe. England is not so much affected by Western Rome's decline, because England was not really part of Rome when Rome declined. But anyhow, this entire systemic collapse of strong, large urban centers starts. And you have castle-based economies and castle-based polities coming up. So instead of large, impersonal, city-based organizations, you have smaller, personal, castle-based organizations that would last for another around 900, well, less than 900 actually, around 800 years, when cities again start reappearing around 1000 AD. You have large cities. You also have universities that come up. So University of Bologna becomes one of the first modern universities, European universities, that came up in 1080 AD or something around that period. So you have these structures coming up, and Hogwarts Castle sort of exists in the intersection of both. It's a castle economy, castle polity, that is also a sort of university system. I say university because people call them professors, not teachers. So it's a university system. But universities, of course, were not as structured or as what we understand today. Universities were extensions of the church. They were universitates, means universitatem, means to sit together for a concrete purpose, and they were just assembled. And so Hogwarts, established around the same period, 950 AD, that is the approximate date that the Chamber of Secrets gives, is a castle where wizards have, at least 4 wizards, have sat down together for the purpose of magical instruction. So yeah, you have that whole structure there. And if you ask about the relevance of the medieval, which I think is a question that I can anticipate here, is it's actually interesting, because fantasy novels, European fantasy novels, tend to be medieval, or at least located in the medieval. That doesn't necessarily say that it has to be located temporally in a medieval, but they have medieval continuities. So for example, in a novel like fantasy novel, like again based on magic, if I may compare, Dr. Strange and Mr. Norrell, or Mr. Strange, no, Dr. Strange. Dr. Strange and Mr. Norrell, it's based in Victorian England. It's based in early 19th century. It's not Victorian, but slightly pre-Victorian, 19th century. But it has enormous medieval myths, the tale of the fairies and all of that. It has these huge footnotes which talk about the medieval background. So they are medieval bases. The reason for that is actually because with the development of scientific method during the Enlightenment and with the post-Enlightenment stuff, what you have much more information about the period that is post-medieval. With the medieval, myth and truth, logos and mythos, it's much easier for them to intersect. And since the information that you have is relatively ambiguous, because large changes in meaning, large shifts in what things stand for, in word meanings, even the basic word meanings, happened from the medieval period, there's a huge chasm. Perhaps this chasm is even larger than the chasm that we have from the ancient to the modern. Because the problem with writing the history of the ancient period is we don't have much sources. If it comes to India, we don't have almost any sources. A couple of days back, one of the legendary professors of presidency, Rajat Kantorai, he was in a lecture a few days ago, totally unrelated with this, but he made this comment that the history of ancient India is written on such flimsy evidence that it's not even worth writing it. So that's actually a problem genuinely that happens in ancient history, that you don't have too many sources. The problem with medieval history is a whole other piece of work. It's that we have sources, but we don't know how to make sense of them. Or at least people who are trained in medieval history, they don't know how to make sense of them. One example is from roughly the same period that the Harry Potter Hogwarts Foundation is based, is the Domesday Book. So the Domesday Book, I don't know if you people have studied about it in literature, but the Domesday Book is a document. It's a huge book, like this size, and huge, like massive. It's a record of all property in England, all property owners and what property they own. So pretty much a record of all material property in England in the year 1086. That's like 10, 20, within 20 years after the Norman conquest, when William the Conqueror actually initiated the process, because he wanted to know what he owns. He wanted to know how many castles he has and how many castles his barons have and stuff like that, and how and what property they own. It's called the Domesday Book because there was this idea that Christ is about to return at any moment, and the epoch of the Armageddon, the day of revelation, is going to start, and so we have to answer to God what we have. So let's keep account of that. Now it should be, it's still kept in English in the British Library. It should be a fantastic source to know what everybody had and what was the economy like and what was society like. It is to some extent, but the problem is, it was an interview. People were interviewed. Actually, there were 10 questions. It's one of the world's first systematic interviews, and there are 10 or 20, I'm not sure, but a number of questions, standardized questions that were made, and people were interviewed as, okay, do you have this? Do you have that? How many pigs do you have? How many goats do you have? How many lakes do you have? And stuff like that. The problem is, the interview was done by people, royal officials, who were native French speakers. So the interviewers were native French speakers. The interviewee was native Anglo-Saxon speaker, and the whole thing was written down in Latin. So, talk about problems of translation. There's a whole economic system, landholding system known as the manore, but we have no idea what manore actually means. Is it the Roman manor? Is it a medieval manor, castle manor system, or is it something totally different? We have no clue about it. So we have the source, and this is the problem why mythos and logos becomes very easy to intertwine. Things become easy to reinterpret. Things become easy to interpolate, extrapolate, and all of that in medieval history. That makes medieval history the fertile ground for the creation of fantasy novels. And it's not just novels or literature where you have this whole idea of medieval fantasy. The entire idea, and that's why studying medieval history, medieval European history particularly at the university is like what do you say? It's basically disenchantment, because I remember I think Christo is in the audience, and because he said he would be. So Christo and I both had this experience, because the first thing that they taught us about medieval feudalism is that it never existed. So the whole pyramid structure of the king at the top, of God, and then king at the top, and then the barons and the nobles and the tenants and the serfs, and this whole pyramid structure, the structured pyramid system, the feudal system, as to say, never existed. That's just Marxist historiography. That's fantasy. That is medieval fantasy. That's based on some sources that you don't interpret properly, and then you create something that's medieval fantasy. So medieval novels, medieval period is fertile ground for fantasy. That's my summary point. I've spoken too long about it. Sorry.
I really loved hearing you out. Maybe we can branch Christianity and branch into how you are mixing Christianity and medieval history here. Talk about somebody actually speculated here about how King Arthurian legends or the Arthurian legends are mixing with the stories, and if you can transform from that into Christianity.
Yeah, Arthurian legends are probably pre-Christian. We don't actually know very much, because they're written, rewritten, and rewritten. So it's really difficult to talk about Arthurian legends. The basic core idea is pre-Christian. That's pretty clear. From the geographical location where it roughly talks about the linguistic analysis, if you can do it, it's pre-Christian. But it got rebranded into Christian tropes, so to say. And that is very interesting how that happened, because you have these symbols, but Harry Potter has relatively evaded the Arthurian legends to some extent. It has the idea of the knights, sort of. Chivalry is again another medieval myth. That kind of a codified official chivalry never existed. Yeah. The other important things about Merlin appears actually in Harry Potter. There's this Order of Merlin. There's an award. I think Dumbledore won the Order of Merlin. Yes, and Merlin's beard is sort of a curse word. Not a curse word, but what is it called?
An exclamatory expression.
Exclamatory. It's exasperatory. Yeah, absolutely. Merlin, Hironma actually has a comment here. It's quite interesting. Interestingly, Merlin supposedly exists in the 10th and 11th century AD in Harry Potter lore. Yeah, Merlin is supposed to exist. and his placement of Arthur, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, in the Harry Potter, there are tangential references to Merlin as one of the big figures, and he's supposed to be contemporary to the four great founders of Hogwarts: Godric Gryffindor, Salazar Slytherin, Helga Hufflepuff, and Rowena Ravenclaw. But not much actually elaboration is made on the role of Merlin here. So yeah, but Arthurian legends, they got transformed into Christianity because you have this whole idea of the Holy Grail, and you're trying to find the Holy Grail, and this idea of a quest, that Harry Potter is also at some level a questing story. At least it becomes in the end a questing. The Deathly Hallows, Goblet of Fire and Deathly Hallows. Ki bolchi. Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows. Sorry. Become questing stories essentially. So that's Half-Blood Prince is actually interesting because nothing happens in Half-Blood Prince. Half-Blood Prince is probably the only book where Harry himself is not in mortal danger, and nothing really happens. But what happens in Half-Blood Prince is again a very medieval idea. The idea came from China through the Silk Route, and we find this first in Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and it got kind of remade in European. So in European war manuals, you also have this idea that if you know, again, a Trinitarian view of the enemy, of the warrior, if you know yourself, but you do not know your enemy, you will. If you know yourself and your enemy, you will be victorious. That's what Sun Tzu said. So Harry knows himself, and he will go into how Harry knows himself, but Harry knows himself and he is trying to know his enemy. That's what Dumbledore is doing with him. He's trying to know his enemy. So he's trying to teach him what Voldemort is and how Voldemort became, and the construction of Voldemort, Tom Riddle to Voldemort, so as to say. And so he's trying to know the enemy. So if you know yourself and your enemy, you will be victorious. If you know yourself but not your enemy, then you will have victory, but that will be mired with defeat. Voldemort is somebody who knows himself, but he doesn't know his enemy because he does not understand the whole deal about Harry, love. And the Dark Lord shall have power, and he shall have powers the Dark Lord knows not. That's the whole idea of the prophecy. And so this is, your electricity is back. That's good. So this whole idea of questing and the Art of War, this gets translated, and this relevance is pretty well documented actually in the story. Yeah. And also the sword. I mean, pulling the sword out of the hat, that's very, very Arthurian. It's not a stone, but it's a hat.
Yeah, and you were saying how the sword resembles less of the Arthurian legends, more of the cross figure. So if you can talk about that.
The sword is a cross. The sword is a cross. The sword is very simply a cross. It only reveals itself because the sword is described, and it's also in the film. The description is pretty accurate in the film. The depiction, it's pretty accurate in the film. The sword is a cross. And if you see the first instance where we find the sword, and the first instance where the sword actually we see in action, that's a very Christian archetype. The sword, cross, Christ's cross, defeating the basilisk, the serpent. That's outright Christian. You can't get more Christian than that. So yeah, it's essentially a cross. Yeah.
You did mention
that apparently nobody but Harry can actually wield, because we don't Neville in the end, but we don't actually see anybody else using the sword apart from Harry. I mean, I'm sure some people might have or must have, but yeah.
Now, you just mentioned basilisk, and there is actually a mention of basilisk in medieval history.
Yeah,
so
it's in medieval crackpot books, basically. Basilisks. What I find funny in Harry Potter lore is that there are not enough basilisks, because it's painfully easy to create a basilisk. You just hatch a chicken's egg under a toad. That's it. There should be the world should be teeming with basilisks, because there's just only one. I mean, how does the Ministry actually even control it? The Ministry supposedly controls it, but how? Yeah. So.
I was reading somewhere that according to the medieval history, you can only defeat a basilisk through a weasel, by putting a weasel in
an
front
otter.
of the basilisk.
An otter. Yeah,
okay.
An otter.
This doesn't happen here.
Yeah, this doesn't happen here. But there are actually so there's this element in Harry Potter that's very strongly reminiscent of Christian motifs. That is the Patronus. And so there are these essential elements of protection in Harry Potter that are very strongly Christian in many ways, medieval or Christian in many ways. And one of them, the good way of protecting yourself, is there is also the bad way. That's Horcruxes are the evil way of protecting. The good way is Patronus, and Patronus is Latin. It directly translates to protection or protector. So expecto patronum translates to I summon a protector. I summon my protector, and they have relations with the power and with the person being casting the Patronus, and they are pure spirits who are solely committed to the protection of the conjurer. They're essentially patron saints, because Patronus and patron saint, they come from the same root. Yeah. So somebody has actually written, John Granger, I think, writes they're angels, but I think they're more close to the idea of patron saints, closer to the idea of patron saint. And that's why they are specifically connected to individuals. So that's your function in the grand scheme. That's your function in the story. So there are patron saints of seafarers. Saint Nicholas is the patron saint of seafarers. Other saints as well. So you have these ideas, and that's why you have specific patronuses of individuals, and they're actually connected. I made a list here. They're actually connected to what their function is. So James and Harry's Patronus are both stags, and stags are a known enemy of the snake. Snakes again depict Satan. I'm coming to that. And stag is actually an early depiction of Christ. In multiple sources, we have stag as a multiple depiction of Christ. Hermione's is, and that's how I connect to your question. Hermione's is an otter. An otter is a known enemy of the basilisk. Dumbledore's is a phoenix, again an enemy of the basilisk, and one of the rare creatures that can survive a basilisk. Lily Potter's is a doe. Lily and both Snape's are a doe, which is an existing medieval symbol of maternal love. So the symbolism is kind of manifest through Patronuses. It's not very difficult to get the idea there. Yeah.
And how is maternal love reflected through the medieval historical perspective?
It's difficult to talk about love or maternal love in the medieval perspective, but it's very easy to talk about it in a Christian perspective. Christianity is all about love. That's their deal, sort of. There are two major themes in Christianity. Love, well, at least original Christianity, not the later dogmatic modifications. Love and death. And both of these two are essentially also it gets mirrored. So these two are also the most obsessive themes in Harry Potter. So it's easy to talk it. If Game of Thrones is a tale of fire and ice, story of fire and ice, then Harry Potter is a story of love and death. And in death is love, or in love is death. This is a very medieval trope, actually. In most medieval folktales, in most medieval epic sagas, you have this idea of death and love as a very coterminous and correlated concepts. So that's how you get to, because love, the essential idea of Christianity and in Harry Potter, that's how you connect them, is this whole idea of self-sacrifice through love, and self-sacrifice because of love being the salvation of mankind or humankind. So being the salvation of humankind, and that's very strong in Harry Potter. So I think we can circle back to these themes. If we go by these themes, then it's very easy. It's very structured.
So death plays a very significant role here, and how everybody is trying to escape death. And if you can talk about Philosopher's Stone and how it's role playing in each and every aspect of escaping death in the story.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned this escaping death thing, because Harry does it a lot. That's Harry's thing. And I think the most interesting thing about it is every time Harry escapes death, if you look very carefully, it is in the proximity of one symbol of Christ. There is always a symbol of Christ present whenever Harry escapes death. So first time is in the dungeon from Red Squirrel and Voldemort, and that's the Philosopher's Stone. Philosopher's Stone symbolizes it's a red stone. So Philosopher's Stone symbolizes eternal life, or if I translate that into biblical language, life everlasting. And then, and it was, and I think I can go into a discussion on Philosopher's Stone a bit. And then the second time is in the Chamber of Secrets. It is in the presence of a phoenix, resurrection. That's again a very Christian. That's a domain of Christ, resurrection, and the intercession and the day of resurrection. That's the whole idea. Then in the third time, I can go on with this. So the prisoner of Azkaban, it's in the presence of his stag Patronus, and stag is a known symbol of Christ in early Christianity. So you repeatedly have these. It goes on. The list goes on. In the book 4, it's in the graveyard, and the film doesn't actually show it because they show too much of mist, but that's because the director, I forgot his name, who directed it, had not read a single Harry Potter book before he directed it. He was an absolute stupid. And he himself actually mentioned it was a mistake that he actually took the job. So he wanted to make it a Hitchcock film. He actually said, I wanted to make it a Hitchcock thriller. It didn't work. Anyway, so but he made too much mist there. But the last thing that Harry actually saw, if you look at the book, is the symbol, the graveyard and the crosses across the graveyard. That's he saw when the portkey kind of took him back to the games, to the Quidditch field there. So you have again the symbol of cross. So increasingly every time you have the symbol of cross repeatedly there in this whole story. The Philosopher's Stone is interesting here because the story starts with the Philosopher's Stone, and John Granger writes about it, and it's a very convincing argument that Harry actually is the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is, for those who don't know, I think most people who are here know what a Philosopher's Stone is. It exists in almost all Eurasian mythos. In China, you had this idea. In China, not specifically Philosopher's Stone because they valued silver more than gold, but you have the similar idea of the elixir of life, which China has. It's an irony that the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huangdi, he actually died trying to live forever because he died because he tried to live forever, because his alchemists who were in charge of creating the elixir of life gave him mercury, which kills you. So this is not a one-off incident. Actually, a lot of alchemists died because they were proto-chemists, so they created stuff that they had no idea what they were. And one of them was actually gunpowder. Gunpowder was one of the alchemists' creation, and definitely the guy who created it died because it exploded. Another one, and we know the person who the first person on record, these are all in China, by the way, the first person on record who created another elixir of life also died trying to drink it, because what he actually created is oil of vitriol, also known as sulfuric acid. So he definitely died drinking it. So anyhow, so these were these attempts. But in medieval Europe, this idea probably, I did not do an architecture of this idea, but it traveled. In India, this idea was tangential. It probably came through the Islamic migrations. This idea came from the Islamic world. It spread from China through Mongols, or early Mongols and early trade routes, and then went into the Islamic world, and from Islamic it came to China, because in India it's very marginal. The idea of the Porosh Pathur. And that was a strong idea. But anyhow, in Europe, this idea got a lot of traction because Europe valued gold more than silver. So there was this whole idea of creating, and same in Arabia, actually, this whole idea of creating gold out of base metals. So if you touch base metals are actually not all metals. Mercury is a base metal. Zinc, mercury, zinc, and I think iron. These are the three base metals. And they included one more, which I cannot remember which one. Sorry, not mercury. Lead, zinc, and iron. These are the three base metals. So if you touch, lead, plumbum. So if you touch the Philosopher's Stone to these base metals, they transform into gold. Not possible before the discovery of radioactivity, by the way. But anyhow, this was actually banned, not so much by the church, which gets most of the blame for banning things, but this was banned by the monarchs, because if you can just create gold at the touch of a stone, then that would debase the currency, because currencies are based on gold and the value of gold, and the value of gold is based on the scarcity of gold. So you can't, it's dangerous, politically and economically dangerous to just create gold like that. So there was some, but monarchs also tried controlling it. So you have these books, total crackpot. There's no value in them, but you have these whole books that tell you how to create a philosopher's stone. These were people made a lot of money out of it, and one of the people who made a lot of money out of selling these total useless books was Nicolas Flamel. Nicolas Flamel. He's an actual person. He died in 1418. Funny thing, he was never actually an alchemist. Historically speaking, he was never. He's a real person. He was never actually an alchemist. People started a story that he was an alchemist after he died, which is extremely ironical, according to me. Like, if you're an alchemist and a successful one, you're not supposed to die. Anyhow, maybe that's how the Harry Potter timeline kind of tries to make sense of it, by killing Nicolas Flamel in the end, because they want to destroy his stone. Anyway, anyhow, not sure. But so you have this whole idea there, and what's funny is that these whole manuals are going around Europe of how to create a philosopher's stone. But at the same time, you have this alternative idea that gains traction, largely starting with the Islamic world and then migrating both ways, is that the creation of the philosopher's stone is not exactly a material process, it's a spiritual process. So the person, after trial through fire, after going through the process of purification, becomes the philosopher's stone, becomes gold. So the philosopher's stone is kind of the tribulations to become gold. The soul becomes gold, and that's it. It's one of the cornerstones of Sufi Islamic practice, religious practices. So, but this idea actually plays very strongly in Harry Potter, because, well, the philosopher's stone does two things. One, it creates gold, which, if we identify as a spiritual process, then it's, sorry, I'm feeling too cold. If we identify as a spiritual process, then is just self recreation. And the other is it creates the elixir of life, so it transcends death. And Harry is the person, is the boy who lived, is the person who transcends death. And I'll show you something interesting, rather, is that there's this thing that started circulating in Europe, mainly with the monarchs, because it's very expensive, this richly decorated manuscript, or a richly decorated thing called the Ripley Scroll. A Ripley Scroll is kind of a Cliff Notes version, or what's one of those sites that you use for reading a novel that you don't want to read. It's the Cliff Notes version of these books, which has these short notes on the sides, and there's this huge illustration. It's a very long scroll. That was, I think, 23 copies have so far been found of it in different states of perfection. Some are very beautiful, some are not that beautiful, some are very rudimentary. One of them is kept at the British Library. If anybody goes to London and is interested, you can see it. It's the British Museum, if I'm not wrong. If you're interested, you can see it. It's very long, almost a whole room wide, but it's quite interesting. So I want to show you a part of it, and you will see it goes from top to bottom. So there's this picture of a wizard. You can just Google it. You'll see it. There's this picture of a wizard that's making it. The wizard looks exactly like Dumbledore, and this whole process of this transformations. We actually had the picture on our poster. That's the background of our poster. Those are the 8 transformations that the stone goes through. And there's this whole deal about killing a serpent inside a well, Chamber of Secrets, and then the whole process continues. And then the final product is not one stone; it's actually 3 different stones that combine in a particular order to create the Philosopher's Stone. And the 3 stones, I'll show you quickly, if I can share my screen. Share screen. Yeah, it's okay. Just a moment. Yeah, is my screen visible? Samraggni, is the image visible?
Yes, it's now
That's
visible.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so in the end, this is just a fragment of the scroll, by the way. So in the end, this is the last part. So the last process is, yeah, it's Ripley scroll panels 11, 12, and 13, is the creation of three stones, the black stone, the white stone, and the red stone. It has to be combined in this order. I think you can connect Trinitarian ideas to it. And in this combines, and then there is this nice beautiful looking dragon, household items completely. This dragon who must drop it inside a particular cauldron, the world cauldron, and then you get the philosopher's stone, and then you look like this guy. uh, so he actually has a bottle of whiskey in his pocket, by the way. So your job is done, you drink now. Anyway, and this is these are the three stones. The colors are a bit hazy. It's a very old manuscript after all. And if you look at the final moments when Harry goes through this death process, Harry chooses death. The moment before that is again a Christ moment, because Harry learns of his destiny. He is a pig for slaughter, basically, as Snape puts it. He learns of his destiny, and then he comes down. I don't remember where this happens in the book, but in the film, this happens pretty nicely on the staircase, on the grand staircase down from Snape's, the headmaster's office. And he is traumatized, probably, and he is also contemplating his role. What is he supposed to do? Does he embrace his destiny and die, or does he fight and try something else? And that's the moment, that's Christ's moment, Christ's dilemma in the Garden of Gethsemane, or Gethsemane, however you call it, where he is not sure whether he wants to embrace his idea, but he makes a choice. And that's Christian, to make this choice of self-sacrifice in Christ's tradition. It's not exactly in the Bible, it's actually Milton's fan fiction, but Christ, the Son of God, not Christ, but the Son of God, had actually volunteered. He chose to salvage humankind. And so the moment when he walks into the garden of not the Garden of Eden, sorry, the black forest, the dark forest, he meets his whole resurrection process is actually three people who are the three stones. He meets Sirius Black, voila, black stone, who actually pushes him, nudges him towards that choice, because he is scared. Harry is understandably scared of choosing it, and then he asks, does it hurt? And he says, and Sirius Black says, it's easier than falling asleep. And he goes and meets his destiny. He is killed, in quotes, by Voldemort, and he meets Albus Dumbledore. Alba is white. That's you get the word albino from. So Alba means white, and he meets Albus Dumbledore, and that's the white stone. So you have, from the black stone, you then go to the white stone, and Albus Dumbledore again puts him a little bit of wisdom in his head, and then he nudges on in the direction that he must choose. I mean, Dumbledore has his way. He says, yeah, you can go on, but again, he has to present it as a choice, because if he doesn't choose, he doesn't become that Christ figure that he's supposed to be. And then he comes back to life. He's resurrected, so to say, and he is carried, but nobody knows he's resurrected. He's resurrected, but nobody knows it. Knowing it is very important. He's resurrected, and that's the moment in Hebrew theology that we would call he's in the shaul. He's in sort of limbo position, and he's dead, but his soul is there, sort of this weird kind of thing. And then he is carried back to Hogwarts Castle by the Red Stone, Rubeus Hagrid. Rubeus means red. He's carried to Hogwarts Castle by Hagrid, and then the moment comes when everybody realizes he's still alive. So that's there his recognition of being alive. That's when he jumps out of Hagrid's lap. That's when you have the resurrection is completed, transcendence of death is completed. Harry has transcended to become the Philosopher's Stone. He has become the golden stone. He has become gold. And well, he's sort of always gold, because when Harry's hair is added to Polyjuice Potion, it turns golden, bright golden. His wand also emits bright sparks. So yeah, that's the idea. So I think we can all make a Philosopher's Stone if we have a dragon. So if you read the scroll, that's the idea you get. You just have to make this dragon drop things drop the three stones into this cauldron. Yeah. Anything?
Yeah. I was actually thinking about. I mean, we also have this question where somebody has asked us about the choice, the aspect of choice, and if it's free will oriented or it's predestined. And you and I, we were talking about how choice plays a huge role in here. And I want you to talk about choice in two aspects, where you have Tom Riddle and then you have Harry Potter, and how the two most alienated characters here are playing with this idea of choice.
Yeah, both have a choice. They have had choices, because both. It's easy to write off Tom Riddle as a product of his circumstances. He is the heir of Slytherin. Well, yeah, you can't do anything about it. But he has the choice to salvage Slytherin, or he has a choice to follow in his footsteps, in the sense that he is, well, he becomes Voldemort. And what does Voldemort actually mean? It's French. It's Old French. Voldemort means fleeing from death. Voldemort is Old French, means fleeing from death. And this whole idea of death, choosing death and not choosing death, this becomes a very, so Harry and Voldemort become oppositional figures. One chooses death, one chooses sacrifice, and the other clings on to life anyhow possible. So one transcends death by becoming the Philosopher's Stone. So you see the death. So if you put these three figures in Trinity, Harry, Dumbledore, and Voldemort, you will see that this whole idea of the choice of death, being death, how do you transcend death, becomes an overarching figure, overarching theme, because Harry actually succeeds in transcending death by becoming the Philosopher's Stone, by choice, he becomes the Philosopher's Stone. Dumbledore actually tries to transcend death similarly by becoming the Master of Death, through becoming the owner of the Deathly Hallows, not just one, all the three Hallows. And he actually has all the three Hallows, but only at different periods of his life. The wand is, and he takes the cloak of invisibility from James Potter just before he died, and he also gets, but he returns it, and then he gets Voldemort's mother's ring, which is Merope-Gont's ring, which is actually the Resurrection Stone. But he doesn't have them all together. So he is sort of the foil character. He is the one that did not become something. And you have Voldemort, who tries to cling on to life in a very different way, in the evil way, in the magic world, so to say. And I should point out here, to be evil, the phrase to be, Hebrew actually works, Old Hebrew actually works in modern standardized Hebrew, no, but Old Hebrew works similar to Chinese and Japanese. You can derive multiple meanings out of the same, multiple translations, like a spiral out of the same thing. And to be evil can be retranslated or rebranded as one who is broken, one who is broken into pieces in ancient Hebrew. So Voldemort does exactly that. He breaks himself into pieces, and it's his choice of what is important, what is his treasure. So you remember this phrase on Ariana Dumbledore's grave, that is actually from the Bible. That's not surprising, because most Christian burials in England at least have biblical quotes, unlike American ones. There's this quote from Matthew chapter 6 verse 21. For where your treasure is, there your heart shall be also. And where is Voldemort's heart? It's in his Horcruxes. That's his treasure. Whereas Dumbledore's heart is with his family. So this is Voldemort's choice. Voldemort chooses to cling on to life. Voldemort chooses to be this figure. He chooses life, basically, in the wrong way. And Dumbledore actually says, I don't remember when, but he says, I knew a boy long ago who made all the wrong choices. Yeah. So Dumbledore says, and so this element of choice is very important. Harry survives because of choice. If Harry did not go in the forest thinking, and there's an explanation, if Harry did not go into the forest thinking that he will die, and he's ready to die, he says, I am ready to die. That's when the Resurrection Stone opens. I am ready to die, then it would not have been his choice. And it was also his mother's choice that actually rendered him the protection that he had. This is a very important thing that sometimes gets asked, that, okay, well, James Potter also died. Why did not James Potter's sacrifice actually did not activate ancient magic? Why did not James Potter's sacrifice contribute to Harry's protection? Well, because James Potter did not have a choice. James Potter just saw somebody intruding and he ran without even his wand and he got killed. And well, Lily Potter actually was given 3 warnings. Voldemort asked Lily Potter to move thrice. Born to those who had thrice defied him. So it was she was given 3 requests. She was commanded thrice to remove, and she did not. She chose to stay there. That's what. And what was responsible for that choice? Why did Voldemort give Lily Potter, the Mudblood, the choice? The choice was because Snape had asked him to. And Voldemort did not understand why Snape would ask, because he could not see love. He could not understand love. He could not it physically pained him to feel love. So he could not understand love. So he didn't really get it, but Snape was pretty valuable. So he probably just went ahead with the plan. So it was love and it was choice. So the choice is very important. And also because Harry chooses to die. So because Harry chooses to die, yes, somebody pointed out 3 is again a biblical number. Absolutely, 3. We have constantly we are focusing on these Trinitarian views. Because Harry chose to die in the Dark Forest is because he gave the same protection that his mother had given to him to all the people fighting the Battle of Hogwarts. That's why when Neville is actually burnt by Voldemort, he doesn't burn. He emerged unscathed. So it was the same protection that he had given.
I think this would be a good point if you could talk about how the Horcruxes are the whole Christian elements and connotations to that.
Yeah, somebody asked this question. I don't know if the Horcruxes hold Christian connotations as such, but there's an interesting progression that happens in the Horcruxes. There was a question on the Horcruxes. I'll just quickly look up. Could the Horcrux of the tiara be something related to Jesus's thorn crown? Yes and no. It both is and isn't the relation, because tiaras are basically crowns in a different sense, and crowns in general are related to Christ's crown of thorns. So it's not specifically the tiara as a Horcrux that is related to the Christian figure in it, the Christian symbolism in it, but it's generally the whole idea of a crown that is related to because it's distinctly Christian to wear a crown as a symbol of Christianity, as a symbol of royalty. Chinese emperors or Indian emperors or Ottoman emperors, even, they didn't wear crowns. The Ottoman emperors wear headdresses. Chinese emperors wore headdresses, but they did not have the same value of a crown. You don't say you are headdressed as it's you're crowned. So yeah, the same idea is there. But so yes, both true and false there. But what's interesting is what I find interesting in the Horcruxes is how it moves, how the progression happens in the nature of the Horcruxes. As I just explained, the Horcrux is the archetypical element of being evil, because the Horcrux requires you to split your soul. It requires you to split your soul, and you're broken into pieces, which is the Hebrew for being evil. And Voldemort becomes evil the moment he starts making Horcruxes, and he starts making Horcruxes when he was still at school. He kills Moaning Myrtle, and he becomes a he makes his diary into a Horcrux. In all probability, that was just testing it out. He was just testing it out whether it at all works or not. Yeah, because it's pretty accidental. Why did you make a diary into a Horcrux? Yeah, but if you then look at the progression that he makes, the first is his diary. The second is his mother's ring. The third is Salazar Slytherin's locket. The fourth is, I forgot the order here, but the fourth is the tiara, and the fifth is Helga Hufflepuff's cup. Yeah, the fourth is the tiara, the fifth is Helga Hufflepuff's cup, and then I think it's Harry, and then it's Nagini.
Maybe we have messed up the tiara and the cups orders.
Yeah,
maybe
that order might be messed. I don't remember it very clearly. And you have this order, but look, he starts with a very personal belonging. That's his diary. Then he goes to his direct, immediate family, his mother's ring. he never saw his mother, but anyway, he connects this to his mother's family. Then Salazar Slytherin. So he's increasing his fear. So there's a logic, there's a method in madness. He's increasing his fear. The more his megalomania increases, the larger and larger things he's associating himself with, the larger and larger frame he's associating himself with. First, he just starts with his personal belongings and then goes to the Hogwarts founders. There is a theory, I'm not sure if it's a fan theory, but people have actually written about it, that Voldemort probably carried Godric Gryffindor's sword when he went to kill Harry. Because Voldemort already has the information about the Potters by 31st of July. And he doesn't do anything till 31st of October. What is he doing in that period? If he's a threat, he would kill him as soon as possible. But then what is he doing? And the reason is because he wanted that death to mean something. So the very fact that we don't know how a Horcrux is made. The Rowling has not elaborated the process of making a Horcrux. It is said that she told her editor once, but the editor puked. The method is so horrible. So she has not revealed the method. But whatever the method, it is, if Voldemort's soul actually transformed into a Horcrux, if it actually split and attached it to something that is Harry, then it is cogent to believe that Voldemort had taken some precaution. He had done something to initiate the process of Horcrux creation. And knowing what he was doing in that period, the kind of things he was making into Horcruxes, it stands to reason that he would make Horcruxes out of all the 4 founders of Hogwarts, the items of the founders of Hogwarts, and the Sword of Gryffindor is one of them, which is a cross. And whether it would take a Horcrux or not is doubtful, because the Sword of Gryffindor only takes something that is more powerful, that makes it more powerful. And I don't know if Horcrux would make it more powerful. Anyhow, the interesting bit is that it didn't, and Harry became the 7th Horcrux. If you know your canon well, that you would know that Voldemort actually wanted to create 7 Horcruxes even before he made a single Horcrux, because he asked Slughorn whether it's possible to split your soul into 7 pieces. 7 in medieval numerology is a holy number, because that's the number of days God created the world in. 6 days and 1 day rest, so 7 days total that took of 7 days of creation. And 8 in similar numerology is the symbol of is the number of self-destruction. Because you sow the seeds of self-destruction by trying to transcend God, by this kind of Icarus moment. You're trying to go higher than God, so it's self-destruction. And Voldemort did not know that Harry had already been the 7th Horcrux, so he desperate to create 7 Horcruxes to be complete, he created the 8th Horcrux. And the whole accident happened because he did not understand love, because Harry had the power he did not understand. Yeah. So Horcruxes I don't know if Horcruxes are connected to Christian theology directly.
What about the spells? The magic spells?
Magic spells? I think we discussed Expecto Patronum.
Avada Kedavra, the most important.
Avada Kedavra, yeah. The 3 curses, they are interesting. Crucio and Imperio are easy. They're simple Latin, actually. Somebody got lost about the 8th Horcrux. Okay. Nagini is the 8th Horcrux, actually, because Voldemort wanted to create 7 Horcruxes, and he did not know that Harry had already become a Horcrux. And so he created the 8th Horcrux as Nagini. So if you see who destroyed which Horcrux, the order is very clear. Harry destroyed the diary in the Chamber of Secrets. Voldemort destroyed the ring. Harry destroyed the locket. No, let me go in order. Harry destroyed the locket. Harry and Ron destroyed the rocket, I think. Anyway, the locket, not the rocket. They destroyed the locket. Then the Fiend Fire destroys the diadem. Then the Fiend Fire in the Room of Requirements, that destroys the diadem. Then Ron and Hermione destroy the cup of Helga Hufflepuff, and then Harry is killed by Voldemort himself, because as a Horcrux, Voldemort can kill him. Nobody else can exactly completely kill that part of him. And then the final one is the diary. Neville kills the snake. Yeah, with the Sword of Gryffindor, accidentally. I think, most probably accidentally, but he doesn't know it's a Horcrux or anything about it. He just grabs a random sword and kills a snake, and that turns out to be so. Yeah, that's the 8th Horcrux. I think that's clear.
Somebody has asked us a very interesting question since we were talking
Yep.
about Neville here.
Okay. Yeah,
Ranjana
Drisha
Chakravarti
Chakravarti has asked, that's the number of seals in the Book of Revelations. Yeah, that is 7
Yeah.
seals. But the Book of Revelations is actually is bonkers because it's basically revenge fiction. The author of the Book of Revelations was just writing symbolical curses at the Roman Empire for destroying the temple. So it's in circles of religious studies is not taken very seriously. But yes, there are in the meeting of the 3 brothers and death, there is actually an allusion to the apocalypse. Apocalypse. What is it called? Tapestry. That is at the University of Exeter, which it's kept. It's a medieval tapestry. It's kept in the University of Exeter, where Rowling had attended. So that shows the 4 horsemen and the conversation between the 4 horsemen. That's from that book of Revelations. Yeah, Neville.
Ranjana Sharkar has mentioned, she writes, you mentioned Neville as a wielder of the sword, right? It made me wonder if his name be traced back to a Christian origin, as a Christ-like figure, as we see in the case of Harry.
The existing literature does not actually talk about Neville as Christ, but it does talk of Neville as a saint, specifically Saint Margaret, because there's this connection with Saint Margaret in the sense that Neville was offered the choice of turning to the other side, turning to Voldemort, and he was a pureblood. He was offered the choice of turning to Voldemort. He didn't. He, as a true saint would, he did not. He stood steadfast, and he was burnt. So that's his trial, and he emerged as like Saint Margaret. He emerged unscathed through his tortures. He emerged without a scratch, and he also suffered torture through the torture of his parents. That's his childhood. So he has been compared to Saint Margaret. I should point out, actually, when we are on this discussion, that there's a literature on Dumbledore, and Dumbledore is not only a part of this Trinitarian view, but Dumbledore is also likened to John the Baptist. It's not just me or random people who have no job at their hands who are likening Dumbledore to John the Baptist. J.K. Rowling, in an interview, actually said offhand, Dumbledore is John the Baptist to Harry's Jesus. You'll find the interview on YouTube. He's John the Baptist because he is somebody who had every opportunity. He could have become the Messiah. He could have had the Deathly Hallows. He even had the Deathly Hallows, just not all at one point, but he had them. He could have probably defeated Voldemort. I don't know. He was certainly powerful enough to do it. He orchestrated this whole death, which was anyway in his own control. So he could have defeated Voldemort. He could have become the Messiah, but he abdicated, knowing God's plan, knowing the divine predestination of Harry being the Messiah. He abdicated that position, and when he realized that is the case, he trained Harry. He gave Harry every tool possible, every tool necessary to defeat Voldemort, and through different ways. And even in his death, they have said John the Baptist and Dumbledore have very similar deaths. They're both killed by reluctant killers who are just obeying orders, who don't want to actually kill, but who are obeying orders. So, yeah.
Please talk about Avada Kedavra and the link with
Avada Kedavra.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crucio and Imperio, as I was saying, the 3 curses. The Crucio and Imperio is easy. In Latin, Latin verbs ending in O, usually, not all, the regular verbs, ending in O is simple present, first person singular. So it means I do ... So like veto is I object. Crucio is I torture. Imperio is I command. Avada Kedavra is not actually Latin. It's Aramaic, the language that Christ probably spoke. And it translates roughly to "may the thing be destroyed." So let the thing be destroyed. It's a bit of an irony that it became a killing curse because it was used in the sense of destroying illnesses and sickness. and bacteria or viruses in modern terms, mainly infectious sicknesses. And it got bastardized in Europe as abracadabra. So if anybody has identified the similarities, it's not accidental. It got made into abracadabra, which lost its meaning, of course. But the funny thing is, and I'll show you, there was these talismans that were made in medieval Europe to ward off evil, and most importantly, to create these. This is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible now. Yeah.
It's visible? Yeah. So this is one. This is actually written in Hebrew. This is a genuine one. And this is the modern Roman equivalent. We actually, historically, both can be found. This is abracadabra written, and then it just removes one letter from the end. There are some which remove both letters, both extreme letters, and this is a much shorter triangle in that case, and only A remains. A or alpha or aleph is, of course, Christ, because he's the alpha and the omega. And this remains, and this was placed, this one is actually Roman. This was placed on the hand. It's an amulet sort of a thing. The Romans, some Romans used it. Romans, they did not believe in Judaism or Christianity in this period, but this is Judaic, this is Hebrew, but they pretty much took every talisman possible. I mean, if it works, it works. I don't care if it's Jewish or Christian or Greek. And this is a Latin one. It's a modern recreation, but you have these pieces of parchment where this thing has been made, and you put it on the sick person's body, and the sickness, so may it be destroyed. That means may the sickness be destroyed. It's ironical that it gets inverted into may the person get destroyed. So it's personal destruction. Oh, your electricity is gone again.
Yeah, I'm having a bad day.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So somebody has it functions as the negation of abracadabra, which means I will create as I speak. Yeah, that is actually a bastardization. I mean, abracadabra literally doesn't actually mean anything. Later, people who were trying to again sell books kind of came up with this etymology in many senses. But yeah, you're right. It's a negation.
We are already past an hour. If you could end with how Malfoy becomes this character of oppositions, and how that how his role plays in the entire book, and the Christian and the medieval elements of that.
Yeah. Just before I do that, there's one interesting bit that I found. Somebody actually did it. It's not my own research. Somebody else did it. That's very interesting. Is this whole, not only this medieval, based on this medieval setting, but also this conundrum that some people pointed out. Why is Rowena Ravenclaw's symbol, or why is Rowena Ravenclaw's mascot, Ravenclaw house's mascot, an eagle? Shouldn't it be a raven? Because it's Ravenclaw. Like if it's a bird, then why should it be another bird? So then they thought, okay, are eagles very intelligent? Well, no, ravens are the most intelligent birds. So why is it that? And some people then decided to look into it. And so what do we know about Ravenclaw? Well, they said that, okay, well, Ravenclaw is from Albania. And both the Ravenclaw and Helena Ravenclaw say that they're from Albania. Helena Ravenclaw hides the diadem in, oh, he's back. Helena Ravenclaw hides the diadem in Albanian forest and stuff like that. So it fits. And the symbol, or the bird, the royal bird, or something, on the flag, is a two-headed eagle. And that makes sense. Okay, fine. Then they must be Albanian royalty or something like that. That's why they're using the emblem of Albania. The only problem with that is that Albania didn't exactly become much of a kingdom or anything till 1250s, and that's the time when both Rowena and Helena Ravenclaw probably were dead for good for a long time, because Hogwarts is set up somewhere around 950s. So that's like 300 years away. And so they started looking again, and the Sorting Hat actually places them, said Fair Ravenclaw of Glen. Glen is Scotland. It's an old word for Scotland, and this is a symbol that medieval cartography still continues to be useful, still continues to be operating in the Harry Potter universe. And is Fair Ravenclaw of Glen, and then people started looking for relationships of Glen and Albania, and voila, the Romans called Scotland Albania because it's from the tribe Alba. It's the Latinization of the tribe Alba. The Romans called it Albania, and that makes much more sense because if Voldemort was defeated, Voldemort was sort of weakened by Harry. He lost his corporeal form, he lost his body, and he's just like a floating spirit. It doesn't make sense for him to go from Godric's Hollow, which is in Cornwall in southern England, all the way to Albania, which is like 2,000 kilometers away. In that weakened state, he probably just went like 400 kilometers north to Scotland. And what was he living off of? He was living off of unicorn blood, and well, Scotland's symbol, national symbol, is a unicorn. It's funny, actually. It's actually funny that Scotland's royal symbol is a unicorn. It's an actual symbol of an animal that doesn't exist. And this works essentially, and this is the fun thing, and the beauty about medieval worlds and medieval settings is that this forms this cogwheel where you can fit, okay, it's an actual thing of an animal that doesn't exist, so it must exist somewhere, and the Harry Potter multiverse comes in and joins. So that's the point of having a medieval setting. With ancient, you can't do that because you don't know what exists or what doesn't, because you don't have sources. That's this problem. So that's one thing. Yes, Malfoy. Sorry for the detour. Malfoy is the Welsh flag also has a dragon. Yeah, the British British Isles actually has a lot of stuff that doesn't exist. But yes, also in the Harry Potter universe, you have Welsh dragons. In the Welsh Hornback or something like that, this dragon, you had that. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that Malfoy is not alone here. You have throughout the Harry Potter story, you have something called the alchemical cycles that work. There are these oppositions. You can read about alchemical cycles, and you have these oppositions that go from circle to circle to circle and come to the present narrative. And these oppositions are between, again, these alchemical cycles are not Christian, but the connotation in the Harry Potter novels are Christians, because in the first opposition you have Godric Gryffindor. Griffin is a known symbol of Christ, and Gryffindor's house mascot lion is again a known symbol of Christ, because, well, C.S. Lewis's Aslan of Narnia, that's a Christ figure. You have the lion, and the other hand, as a foil, you have Salazar Slytherin's Slither, snake. He's a Parseltongue, snake. And that's the first opposition. The second set of oppositions is between Dumbledore and Voldemort. Dumbledore's Horcrux is a phoenix, again a symbol of Christ, and Voldemort is just the heir of Slytherin, so snake continues. And in the third level, you have the Marauders, basically, and you have James Potter, Stag, again a symbol of Christ, and you have Lucius Malfoy, whose family crest had snakes or something like that. I forgot the exact relation there. And Lucius, again, has relations with Lucifer, etymological relations with Lucifer. You have this cycle, and in the last level, you have Harry Potter, the heir of God, and on the other hand, you have the serpent. And you have the serpent, and the word Draco, or Draconis, in a particular period of Latin, late medieval Latin actually, on the cusp of becoming ecclesiastical Latin, early medieval Latin, cusp of becoming ecclesiastical Latin, means both dragon, which is pagan, and serpent, which is distinctly Christian. And what does the serpent do? The Bible actually doesn't have much of an elaboration on Satan. The extremely attractive Satan figure, winged Satan figure that you see in modern paintings and stuff is Milton's fan fiction. And the images of hell that we are familiar with, the 9 devils of hell and all of that, that's Dante's self-insert fan fiction. The Bible is almost totally silent on all of it. The Bible is not very distinct about it. People who, unlike you, have not spent a significant number of years studying literature or know distinctly about Christian theology don't know that most of these tales are not actually from the Bible. They are just made up at some point from existing novels, existing archetypes, and all of that. So you have these figures, and you have the heir of God, and on the other hand, you have the serpent. And what does the serpent do in the Bible? I mean, if you take literally the Bible, the serpent and Milton's Paradise Lost, the serpents Milton says, and he shall by some false guile pervert and shall pervert. He may by some false guile pervert and shall pervert. So he perverts man. He pushes them towards bad faith. Now translate the serpent to Latin, you have Draco, and translate bad faith into Old French, you have Malfoy. So Draco du Malfoy is a serpent of bad faith. Most English aristocratic families dropped the du from their name during du and there from their name during the 100 Years' War, because they wanted to be more English than French. It's safer to be more English than French in that period. So you get Draco Malfoy in that sense. So you have these cycles that work and these oppositions. Draco Malfoy doesn't actually fit his character at all, because Draco Malfoy, again, he makes choices. Some of his choices are made for him. Like he has to kill Dumbledore. That's a choice that is made for him. He's not comfortable with it, and he pretty much fails at doing it. And he struggles internally because he was raised during peacetime. Violence doesn't naturally come to him as a character, and he struggles mentally about it. And then you also see him. The only actual moment where he is doing something is when he disarms Dumbledore. That's pretty much the only moment where that's the moment where he transcends from a high school bully, a schoolyard bully, to an actual bad guy. Yeah, but he's not comfortable in his character at all. So if I want to sum up this whole thing, sort of, so Harry is this heir of God figure. He's the Philosopher's Stone. He's the heir of God figure. That so if we see he transcends death, but how does Christ actually transcend death? Where does Christ die? So where does Christ die?
On the cross.
On the cross. So he dies on the cross, and the cross is marked as Jesus. And there were 3 crosses. Two of the robbers were also crucified. And crucifixion, by the way, was a very normal punishment in the Roman Empire for criminals. It's not something specifically given to Christ. Some people think that. But so Christ was crucified, and he was marked Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. So that was the King's Cross. Harry, after being killed by Voldemort, goes to King's Cross Station, and he has this. The description says he has this dome of light floating above him. Read Milton, the description of Empyrean. Actually, Dante's description of Empyrean. It's a dome of light. In Purgatorio, he sees this dome of light on top. So he sees that, and he meets a bearded father figure. Obvious connection alert. That's God. Is Dumbledore, who also gives his fatherly wisdom and just nudges him on. So these are, and he comes back and he transcends death in more than one way. And so you have these elements, and you have, on the other hand, you have the serpent. You have the serpent constantly. And Harry's story is also very interesting. I mean, the story opens at age 11 and 12. That's the cusp when the story opens. It's pretty much the same time as when Christ's story opens. Christ is tempted by the devil. And Voldemort is, at the age of 12, in the end of first story, Voldemort is tempting Harry to join his side. Well, obviously, no, not for Harry's good, but then he does it. And so you can read it in multiple ways, but I don't know how to say it if I want to conclude. I don't know how to say it without actually committing blasphemy. I don't want to hurt anybody's religious feelings. Christ is the boy who lived.
Right. Let's
if you have any
address
questions,
a few questions.
Yeah.
We have a lot of questions here.
Some people at least watched it then.
I'm sure many people watched it. Will you just scroll up and find a few questions, because I think I have to change my net connection
Okay, sure.
for a few seconds. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we are visible. Okay. Merlin is existing. Here I pointed out. You mentioned Neville is the wielder of the sword. It made me wonder if my name is Christian origins, Christ-like figure. I think we addressed this question. Tunil Chakraborty has asked, excuse me, who interprets omens, engages in witchcraft or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Yeah, I think he's talking about he's going into the biblical quotation from about witchcraft. So basically, all of this happens in Harry Potter. So if you could just clarify, Tuni, that would be wonderful. But I think I got your point. Hironna again says, interesting to look at the negative connotations of love in Tom Riddle's origin between his parents, while the opposite manifestation of love is attached to Harry Potter's origin. Yeah, yeah. Love is, so as I was telling Samraggni, love and death are essentially the two stories. So if Game of Thrones is a Song of Fire and Ice, then Harry Potter can easily be the saga of love and death. And this whole association of love and death, this connection of love and death, in death is love and love is death, this is medieval. This is a distinct feature of medieval fantasy. This is a repeated trope in medieval literature, actually. I mean, you people, Hironna, Samraggni, you people would know far better about medieval European literature than me. Interesting.
And also in Arthurian legends, that's a very important aspect.
Yeah. It's a repeated trope that happens all through these ideas. Interesting to look at the negative connotations. Yeah, Tom Riddle's Tom Marvel or Riddle, technically Tom Riddle is his father, has this negative connotation because he was conceived, Voldemort was conceived under a love potion, so he cannot feel actual love. It physically hurts him to feel actual love or friendship, and that is the power that the Dark Lord knows not. So he doesn't understand. So that's kind of what drives this whole story. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right there. There's this theory. I think this is a fan theory mainly, that Slughorn says in book 6, Half-Blood Prince, when he shows different potions and he shows the love potion, Amotentia, and he says this is arguably the most dangerous potion in this room. There's some theory that suggests that he knew that Voldemort was conceived under love potion and the destructive essence that it can create and how much of destruction it can create. Somebody also said that it is a certain possibility that Slughorn might have been the creator of the love potion that Merope Gaunt smuggled and gave to Tom Riddle. But I think that's a little far-fetched. Tunir says, in allusion to Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10 and 12, it would also not would you also not consider Harry Potter to receive backlash by some Christians as well? Oh, Harry Potter receives, that's how we started. Harry Potter receives massive backlash. There are like whole communities and parent groups and stuff. So if you have watched Big Bang Theory's prequel, Young Sheldon, then there's this whole thing of Mary, Sheldon's mother, quite concerned about the Dungeons and Dragons. That's actually a real thing. People were actually very scared of Dungeons and Dragons. They even thought it was a communist plot to introduce Satan into the Christian hearts. And well, there's no communism anymore, at least in the Soviet Union form, for Harry Potter to have the same thing. But yeah, I don't know whose plot this is, but yeah, there is a huge backlash. There's book burnings every year. Would the Horcrux of the tiara be something related to Jesus's thorn crown? We addressed this. Yikes, rip, yes, visible. Reminds me of Dragon Ball Z, to be honest. Very true. Is this a mere individual free will oriented choice or the predestined kind? Harry's destination is kind of set because, well, Trelawney makes pretty much the only prediction she ever got right about Harry's birth, and that's literally why Dumbledore keeps her employed. Dumbledore actually employs really questionable people. I mean, really questionable people. Why did he even employ Lockhart in the first place? He knew what Lockhart is. So anyway, how
Talk
do we
about plagiarism. Talk about plagiarism in a famous fiction book and Lockhart. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a reason why Dumbledore hired Lockhart. There's people have written about it. The reason is to keep Harry's ego in check, because Harry is kind of getting comfortable in his shoes as the chosen one, and he is trying to show what he would become if he's not careful. How do we, Hironna's question, how do we address the question of theodicy, faith, and miracle in the magical world of Harry Potter, which draws so heavily from Christian symbols and motifs? Yeah, this is a good question. See, the thing is that it draws from Christian elements, but it's not a Christian novel specifically. Yeah, so it has no problem in reconciling faith and miracle, Miracles are, of course, Christian, but faith is questionable whether it's distinctly Christian. If I get your question right, if I don't, then just if you can put a clarification. Miracles and faith is kind of intertwined here. It gets intertwined here. I was thinking about this. Is Harry Potter draws very extensively from medieval tropes, but faith is actually Teche, or I forgot the Roman version of faith, or Fortuna. Teche and Fortuna, faith and fortune, they become extremely important.
That's quite clearly mentioned. Fortuna, the password to Gryffindor's homeroom.
So that keeps changing.
No, but there was Fortuna. Fortuna, what?
Yeah.
Please, can somebody just comment there? The first or second password to the Gryffindor common room that they spoke to the fat lady. Somebody please just comment there. That would be so lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Fortuna. I think it was in in the first book, the first or second book, I think. Yeah, in the third book, fat lady disappears, so that's not Fortuna. Anyway, so in this context, is Teche, Fortuna, they are distinctly late Roman ideas, Greek and late Roman ideas, and Harry Potter doesn't really dwell very much on Greco-Roman mythos. It was the symbolism or mythos. It dwells more on medieval myths. But what is interesting here is there's one continuation from early Roman philosophy, from Greek philosophy, that is Plato. If you read Plato's Republic, there's a statement that the ideal rulers of a city, a polis, are those who are disinterested, those who are not interested in ruling it. This is Voldemort Dumbledore directly plagiarizes it by saying those who deserve power are those who never see and those who never intend to use it, or something like that. That's from Plato, by the way. Yeah, that's Platonic philosophy. But otherwise, a bit of Neoplatonism, yes, but Greco-Roman thought doesn't really appear very strongly. There's a number of seals. Yeah, we discussed it. 8th Horcrux, negation. Yeah. Can you talk about the color symbolism of the 4 houses? Yeah, the 4 houses, the color symbolism is the 4 elements. So fire, Gryffindor is fire. Ravenclaw is air. Ravenclaw is water. Ravenclaw is water. Slytherin is air. No, sorry. Ravenclaw is air. Slytherin is water. The snakes live in water. And Hufflepuff is a badger, so that's earth. So that's color symbolism. Fortuna, third year. Fortuna major. Yeah, Fortuna major. Harry is the sacrificial lamb. Yes, Harry is the sacrificial lamb. Absolutely, no doubt about it. It's even specified. It's a lamb for slaughter. That's a sacrificial lamb. But it's a sacrificial lamb and Christ. So Christ is a sacrificial lamb. He's a Christ figure. That's what I said. Christ is the boy who lived. Yeah.
Right. I think we have covered most of all the themes that we chose to.
One more, just before I end, one very strong element is the Deathly Hallows is strongly
Right.
Christian, because that's life everlasting. That's, if you just translate it to
the Holy
like Trinity and life everlasting. So that's a method of gaining life everlasting. And the strongest Christian, the Christian 101 that you can get is repeatedly this idea that repentance can recover the soul. That's Christian. No, the splitting of the soul can be Hebrew, can be old Aramaic, stuff like that. But the repentance can repair the soul. That is Christian. That is distinctly Christian. You can't get more Christian than that. So yeah.
Right.
I don't think we have any more questions.
I don't think we have any more questions. And if I let Sagnik talk, he will talk for the entire night and even the morning, and which is lovely, really. We are so happy and honored that you could be a part of the community and really support us in our rebranding. And thank you so much for doing this with us. I think everybody here, including me, we have been enlightened with more of Harry Potter than Rowling herself can enlighten us with Harry Potter. And no, I'm serious.
Rowling presents a unique conundrum here, I should point out, especially given her extremely problematic revelations. That is, we don't support it, at least I don't, what she's been writing and stuff recently, especially the extremely transphobic stuff that she's spewing. But what I just wanted to end with, especially since there are a lot of literature students here, I suppose, literature students love Rolla Barthes and Foucault's idea of the author and Rolla Barthes' death of the author. And Harry Potter, as it is now, with suddenly Dumbledore being gay, and there's being I have no problem with Dumbledore being gay. That's completely fine. That's very nice, but then
I think that connotation was always there. I think that
it was always there, but then let the stories be, and then that was okay. That connotation was there, so that's I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. But then suddenly Hermione becoming black, the revelation that there's a secret Jewish student and Hermione is black is that's what. And when she is specifically described as pale in the novel, and I don't know if I'm being very colorist here or racist here, but I don't know how you can describe a relatively dark person as pale, or even a brown person as pale exactly, unless they're fainting or something like that. But pale can only be a Caucasian white girl, and she is a white girl, and Rowling had a huge role in casting the children who were cast, and she chose a white girl, and suddenly Hermione is black. And that's, since you are all literature students here, that's what happened when the author doesn't die. That's what happened when the death of the author doesn't happen. So I'll conclude that. I don't want Rowling to die physically, but the death of the author.
Of course. We have an entire Vogue article on that. Why? Well, you can find Rowling's comments on very transphobic comments, absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah.
But then you can't. Well, wish her death. That's not acceptable either.
No, I'm not doing that. I'm just saying, literally, theoretically speaking, that's what happened when the author doesn't die. The story keeps changing.
Absolutely. You have to separate the author from the text, at least here right now.
And she doesn't allow it. That's the problem. She keeps changing the story through Pottermore, through Twitter and stuff like this. That's
and then we are not considering it here. You know, Rowling is completely separate from our rereading of the book right now. That's how we are concluding the talk here. That
so this is rereading. This rereading is important because I'm not trying to say these are all authorial intent, but people that Rowling wrote the story for will be aware of these symbolisms because these are archetypical symbols. So Harry is not only a Christ figure that because he does all that he does. He is a Christ figure because in the beginning of the story, he is punished for his virtues. He is punished for his magic. So you have this whole incubus, I think. No, not the incubus. Incubus, is it? Incubus, yeah. So you have these whole people who are punished for what they are. You can say they're punished for what they are, but it's also punished for your virtues. That's Christ. Punished for his virtues. That's extreme. That's a limit. You can't exceed that limit. Exceed limit of unfairness. That being a limit makes it archetypical, makes it universal, makes it acceptable. So these are archetypical images that Rowling is working with. So yeah, this is not just forcefully reading symbolism into somewhere there is no symbolism. I'll conclude there. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Sagnik, for doing this. Thank you so much. Yeah. Our entire team is very fortunate to have you with us. And also, just for the audiences who are still watching, Sagnik has an entire article on Mahabharata, and he has confirmed, or rather given me the hope that he will write more on that topic further. He does have a column there, and you can check our website. I will just post the link here. You can check the other articles in the link given below, and do support all our columns. We are trying our best to include almost everything that is there to read and learn and know from and across the disciplines of studies. We have one on LGBTQ, queer theory, on films, Asian pop culture, Sagnik's column on Mahabharata, on gadgets and all the technical devices that we use today, because people like me, we need to learn about how to use devices, uh, technical devices today. And on an upcoming column on travel, and my co-owner Srijata Mitro and I, we have this idea of starting a column on mythology. So you can click on the link and subscribe to us, mail us, give us your ideas about all the things that you would like us to work on. If you want to write to us, if you want to start a column with us, give us an idea, give us some synopsis of what you want to do with us, and we will definitely look into it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sagnik, for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, and also, just this is very important. I would really like to thank Ishan, Devrup, uh, and if I'm forgetting anybody, Sagnik himself, and everybody who helped to create this event, successful event. Hopefully, it's a successful event. We did it, considering all the nervousness and the power cuts going on in the background. So, thank you so much. Yeah, see you. Bye.